Hello, friends, and let's get started.
Alex inhaled the smell of coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, lazily scrolling through the news on his phone. The morning was sunny, warm, just like the last 7 years of his marriage. Calm, measured. Honey, Kelly's voice, his wife's, sounded soft with the tone he'd always loved. There was something almost childlike about it, a little sly, but with a warmth that made him want to smile. He tore his gaze away from the screen and looked at her. Kelly was standing at the kitchen counter in a light robe, her hair carelessly gathered and a playful sparkle in her eyes. She always knew how to keep her attention, especially when she was up to something. "What are you thinking about?" Alex asked and smiled, setting the mug aside. She took a couple steps toward him, biting her lip as if deciding whether to speak. He knew the gesture. It was part of her little act, a prelude to a conversation in which she was either proposing something interesting or about to convince him of something he'd find out at first but would eventually agree to. "It's our anniversary soon," she began, sitting down next to him and placing her palm on his hand. "And I was thinking, you always said you wanted to go away for a couple days to a cabin in the woods. Get some rest. No work, no phone, no fuss." Alex grinned. Yes, he had, but it was more of a "we should do it sometime" kind of thing. Though the idea did sound tempting. "I don't mind, but, I don't like to celebrate anniversaries separately," he frowned slightly. "Exactly." Her eyes lit up, as if she was waiting for that answer. "That's why I've come up with something special. You'll go alone, rest, and when you come back, I'll give you a surprise romantic dinner. I want to do something special for you." Her fingers squeezed his palm, and she looked at him with such enthusiasm that he even felt slightly guilty for hesitating. "Are you sure?" he asked, scrutinizing her face. "Absolutely," Kelly nodded. "Come on. Alec, when was the last time you were alone? Just you and nature? Sitting by the fireplace, drinking whiskey, reading a book. Sounds perfect, right?" He's really tired. Work, daily routine, constant calls. Maybe this is a really good option. "Okay," Alex smirked, pulling her wrist, pulling her closer. "But you do realize that when I come back, I'll demand compensation for 2 days without you, right?" She laughed, wrapped her arms around his neck, and gave him a quick kiss on the lips. "Believe me, when you get back, you'll love everything I make." The last hours before the trip passed in a flurry of activity. Kelly was cluttering around, helping to pack, even though Alex could do a fine job on his own. "Don't forget warm socks," she reminded him. "Take a blanket, it's cold out there at night. What if there are bears in there?" She paced around the house, cracking jokes with him, but there was something in her gaze that he couldn't quite catch, like a slight nervousness. Maybe she was just worried he'd leave. When he was finally ready, she walked him to his car. "Honey, are you going to miss me?" Alex smiled as he opened the door. "Very much." Kelly wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly, breathing in his scent. He felt her breath on his neck, her fingers sliding down his back, squeezing. She pulled away slightly, looking at him as if she wanted to say something but change her mind. "What?" "I'll miss you. Come back soon." "As soon as you can, love." She took his face in the palm of her hand and kissed his lips in a way that made him dizzy. The kiss was long, hot, almost desperate, almost a farewell. A minute later, he was pulling out of the driveway, looking in the rearview mirror. Kelly was standing on the porch, barefoot, in a light robe, her hair spilling over her shoulders. The drive to the cabin in the woods took about 2 hours. Alex drove, listening to the radio station with classic rock, but even his favorite music didn't help to get rid of the strange feeling in his chest. Kelly had been fussing all morning. She'd practically shoved him out the door, though she'd always had a hard time saying goodbye, especially when he'd been gone for a long time. And now, too easy, too fast. He remembered the look in her eyes. There was something odd about it. Excitement? No, more like nervousness. "You're just getting yourself worked up, Alex." He grinned, turning down the volume of the radio. She's a really caring wife, preparing a surprise for him. It all makes sense, but still, something inside didn't make sense. The house was cozy. Wooden walls, an old fireplace, the smell of pine. Alex threw off his jacket, threw his bag on the bed, and went to the kitchen, poured himself a whiskey, sat down in an armchair. Closed his eyes, exhaled. Silence. Yet despite the solitude, his thoughts returned to Kelly. He pulled out his phone and dialed her text. "How are you doing there, my love? Are you preparing a surprise?" She usually answered right away, especially when he was away. It took a minute. 5, 10. No response. That's odd. He tried calling, but the call dropped after the first ringtone. Alex's eyebrows furrowed. Kelly always kept her phone with her. Even in the shower, she'd put it next to her. Why suddenly no answer? "Busy, cooking dinner, don't panic." He mumbled under his breath and leaned back in his chair and took a sip of whiskey. But the thoughts wouldn't let go. An hour later, he texted again. "Hey, everything okay? You didn't burn the kitchen down in there?" The message went out, but it wasn't read. Another 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. The phone was still silent. Alex walked around the cabin, nervously rubbing his glass in his hands. He didn't understand where the feeling was coming from. It wasn't just anxiety, it was intuition. He tried dialing her number again. It beeped. Dial tone. Disconnected. Something inside him clenched. For hours with no answer. That was too much. Alex thrashed around the cabin, running through the options in his head. Maybe her battery was just dead. But Kelly never left her phone empty. She was the kind of person who charged it ahead of time, always kept it with her. Maybe she fell asleep. But even in her sleep, she always answered, albeit with a short okay. Maybe she left the house. But where? She'd said she'd stay home to cook dinner. Anxiety came over him in a wave. He picked up his phone and opened the surveillance camera app. 2 years ago, he'd installed cameras on the porch and in the living room to feel more secure when he was on the road. His fingers trembled as he hit the play button. The picture loaded, showing a familiar sight: their driveway, the threshold of the house. And then his heart sank into his heels. There was an expensive car on the porch, an unfamiliar one. Alex felt everything inside collapse. This car, the black Mustang, parked right in front of their house. He didn't know her. It didn't belong to Kelly's friends. Didn't belong to any of the neighbors. His fingers trembled as he zoomed in on the camera. The door to their house was slightly ajar. "Who's there?" A click. The camera switched to the living room. A table set for two. A bottle of wine. A vase of flowers. And then movement. A glimpse of someone's back. A silhouette. A man. Alex squeezed his eyes shut, as if he could erase what he saw. But no. Everything was clear. He stood up abruptly, grabbed his jacket. The whiskey in the glass splashed. A drop fell to the wooden floor. The keys. The car. The gas to the floor. Shit. The highway was empty. The headlights picked out the darkness, only streaks of asphalt, the occasional road sign. Think. He tried to convince himself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe someone had just stopped by to visit her. But at 10 o'clock at night? Why hadn't she said anything? Why isn't she answering her cell phone? To hell with guessing. He'll find out for himself. Speed 90. 100. 110. The car roared, tires squealed on the curves. My chest was tightening. His cell phone rang. He almost dropped it, staring at the screen. "Kelly." Alex took the call. "Hello, my love." His wife's voice sounded calm, even a little lazy, as if nothing had happened. He remained silent, gritting his teeth. "How are you? Everything okay?" She continued. "I'm fine," he said. It was hoarse and cold. "What are you doing?" A short pause, almost imperceptible. "I'm preparing a surprise," Kelly answered, her voice as light as ever. His fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter. A surprise. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't speak. "Are you okay?" Her voice softened. "You sound tense." He slowed his breathing, tried to keep himself in line. "I'm fine, just tired." "There, I told you needed to rest." A smile flickered in her voice. What a critter. He turned sharply onto the highway leading to the house. Less than 20 minutes to go. "Are you going to bed soon?" he asked, listening to her tone. "Yeah, I guess so," she said. "Do you mind if I unplug the phone? I want to get ready for the surprise in peace." Everything inside him exploded, but he just nodded into the void. "Sure. Good night, Kelly." "Good night, my love." There was a click. She'd disconnected. Alex tossed the phone on the seat and slapped his palm on the steering wheel. 10 minutes. He would know the whole truth in 10 minutes. Alex turned onto his street and took his foot off the gas pedal. His heart was hammering so hard that the hum in his ears drowned out even the sound of the engine. The house was getting closer. The windows glowed with a warm yellow light, as if there was a cozy, family atmosphere inside. It was the same as always, as if nothing had changed. He turned off the engine a few houses before his own, so as not to attract attention, and slowly twisted the steering wheel toward the curb. Opened the door, climbed out, swallowed, took a deep breath of air. It was quiet, too quiet. Moving cautiously along the sidewalk, he approached the house, scrutinizing the windows. No one in the kitchen. In the living room, his fingers clenched into a fist. A bottle of red wine stood on the table, half empty, 2 glasses next to it, candles, a tablecloth they hadn't used in years. He leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. Everything inside him felt like it had shrunk into a lump. Fool! He was still trying to doubt. But the most important thing that tore at him from the inside came in the next moment. Voices, muffled, coming from above. Alex froze, listening. A man's voice, hoarse, relaxed. A woman's laughter, suppressed, quiet. Kelly's laughter. She'd never laughed so playfully with him. Pain slammed into his chest, hot as poison. Then a sound, muffled, sharp, like the slam of a palm against skin. Then the laughter again, and then a moan. Her moan. Alex didn't even realize how he'd ended up at the door. His head was buzzing, his breathing hitched. He wanted to tear the place apart. He yanked the handle of the back door. It was locked. He braced his shoulder. 1, 2, 3. The door jerked, cracked, but held. There was a sound from upstairs again, the creaking of the bed. Alex gritted his teeth. He took a step back and kicked his foot just under the knob. The wood crunched, the lock clicked. The door swung open sharply, crashing into the wall. The house was filled with silence, but only for a second. Alex rushed to the stairs, jumping over 2 steps. The stairs seemed to disappear under his feet. Alex rushed upstairs, jumping over the steps. His head was buzzing with mixed emotions, frenzy, fear, pain. His breathing was hitching. His legs barely had time to move. With each step, he felt his throat tighten, his anxiety growing with each passing second. As he climbed higher, it became louder and louder. The soft, muffled sounds from the bedroom became clearer. Laughter again. Again the moaning. This could not be tolerated any longer. He reached the end of the stairs and stopped abruptly, tried to pull himself together. But his fingers clenched into a fist and rage rushed through his veins again. The door was ajar. Silence. And in that silence, he pushed the door open. He pushed it hard, so hard that it slammed against the wall. The picture in front of his eyes froze like a frame from a movie that he wanted to stop. A second of silence. And in that second, he saw everything. Kelly, his wife, naked, hair disheveled, on all fours. The sheets crumpled underneath her. Eyes wild with fear, face pale. There was terror in her wide-open eyes. The sheet crumpled in her hands. She frantically tried to pull it higher, as if that would make a difference. And next to her was him, a naked strange man, his hair disheveled, his breathing hoarse, his hands instinctively rushing for his clothes. But he didn't have time. Naked, he stood in front of Alex as if paralyzed. Another man's sweaty odor hit his nose. A second of silence. Alex's eyes darted from Kelly to his lover, from his lover to the bed, from the bed to the candles still burning on the nightstand. He could see their faces, frightened, tense. Kelly opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a word. She yanked the sheet up, covering her breasts as if it could shield her from his gaze. Alex couldn't watch any longer. Damn it, he wheezed, not recognizing his own voice. Kelly spoke first. Her voice was weak, shaky, as if she was trying to justify herself. It's not what you think, Alex. Shut up, he roared. His voice trailed off into a scream, and he himself was startled at how loud it was. The stranger reached for his clothes, but Alex took a step forward. The man froze like an animal caught in a trap. Alex stepped even closer, and the lover raised his hands as if that could save him. Kelly tried to get up, but the sheet moved away, and she settled back on the bed. Panic read on her face. She knew that excuses wouldn't help, that everything had already happened, that everything was already ruined. You were supposed to be back tomorrow, she exhaled, looking at him with despair. Those words, those 4 words, they were the last straw. Those words, those 4 words, they were the last straw. The blood boiled. Alex clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked at her, and hundreds of questions were swirling in his head, but none could escape his lips. How long had this been going on? How many times had he left on business trips, and she'd stayed here? With him, what had she said to this man to make him feel so secure in her home? And why had she chosen this particular anniversary? He took another step forward. The man backed away, hands still raised. I'm going to leave now, he muttered, looking at Alex with a desperate attempt at reassurance. Will you leave? Alex repeated his words as if tasting them. His voice was low, muffled, filled with rage. You've already gone too far. He reached out sharply, grabbed the man by the collar of the shirt the man had never had time to put on. The fabric ripped, buttons flew to the floor, and Alex pulled him closer, clenching his jaws. Who the fuck are you? He barked at his face. Kelly jumped up, screaming. Alex, no. Please don't. But her words were like wind. He didn't hear them. All his attention was focused on the cowardly man trembling under his hand, panic in his eyes. The man mumbled, trying to back away. Alex yanked him forward, looked him in the face, and shoved him sharply away. The lover collapsed to the floor, raking the air with his hands ridiculously, trying to pull back, but Alex didn't give him a chance. He grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, lifted him to his feet with a powerful jerk, and slammed his back into the wall. The house was filled with a thud, and the guy shrieked in surprise. His face was contorted with panic, and he babbled something, trying to speak, but Alex didn't hear. He didn't want to hear. His head was ringing, blood pulsing in his temples. All he could see in front of him were the dirty hands this guy had just touched his wife with, the sweaty hair, the sticky skin that still had her warmth in it. Alex clenched his jaws, then swung around and punched. His lover flew off to the side, collapsed to his knees and coughed, covering his face with his hands. Kelly shrieked. Alex, stop! But he didn't hear her. The boy tried to rise, but Alex grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, which cracked under his fingers, ripped open, buttons spilling to the floor with a thud. Who are you bastard? Alex shook him like a doll. What the fuck are you doing in MY house? The lover wheezed, mumbled something, but the words were indecipherable. I didn't know, he mumbled, covering his face with his hands. Alex struck again, his fist right in his jaw. The guy's head jerked to the side, and he staggered, struggling to stay on his feet. You knew. Alex's voice was low, icy, foreign. Kelly ran up, clawed at his arm. Stop. Her nails dug into his skin, but he only yanked his arm, throwing her off. She staggered backward, fear flashing in her eyes. Fear. Not for him. She wasn't afraid for him anymore. She was afraid for her lover. That was enough. Alex grabbed the guy by the scruff of his neck in one motion and dragged him toward the stairs. God, Alex, please. Kelly rushed after him, tearing up her voice. He didn't stop, dragged him to the stairs, and then pushed him down. The guy went tumbling, hitting the steps, grabbing the air with his hands until he collapsed at the bottom. A muffled groan, an attempt to get up. Get up, bitch. Alex shouted, climbing down. He got up on all fours, then on his feet. He looked pathetic. His lip was split, his chin was bloody, his breathing was confused. Alex stepped forward. The guy lunged back. You will not fucking stand near my house again. Understand? Loverboy nodded desperately, not even trying to speak. Get out. Run. The guy took off from his seat, sprinting for the door, grabbing his jeans, stumbling, pulling them on as he ran. Kelly tried to intervene again. Alex, please, let's just talk. But he wasn't listening to her anymore. His lover swung the door open and sprinted out onto the porch, stumbling. Alex, that's enough. That's it. He's gone. Kelly clutched at his shoulder, trying to pull him toward her. Listen to me. He shook off her hand and looked up into her face. Her eyes were filled with tears, but he saw no remorse in them. Only fear. Only despair. Alex. He was silent. She took a step closer, and something strange flashed in her eyes. You said you like surprises. Her voice was quiet, nervous, almost hysterical. Like it was a joke. As if it was possible to turn everything into a joke. Alex stared at her for a long time. Slowly, silently turned away. Turned around and went to the door. Alex, no. Kelly rushed after him, but he was already outside, not looking back. He walked to his car, feeling the gravel crunching under his feet. Her voice rasped in the darkness. "Alex, wait. Let's talk." But he didn't turn around. He opened the door, got in the car. He took one last look at the house. At the woman standing on the porch, wrapped in a sheet, tears on her face. And then he started the engine and drove off, leaving her with this very surprise. Alex was driving on an empty night road, and the car was silent. No radio, no sounds of the street, only the sound of tires echoing in his head. He stared ahead of him, keeping his eyes on the darkening highway, but it wasn't him he saw. The picture of that room came back to him again and again. Kelly, the bed, the lover. He'd thought he would scream, demand an explanation, that this scene would tear him up inside, but now he felt only an icy emptiness. The anger evaporated, leaving behind a weariness, like after a long, grueling battle that had been lost long before he realized it. He stepped onto the main highway and dropped his speed. There was nothing to hurry anymore. There was nowhere to rush. Ahead was the road. Behind was the house that was no longer his home. It was only now becoming obvious. The phone vibrated on the seat next to him. Alex cast a brief glance at the screen. Kelly. He didn't bother to answer it. A second time. A third. She called again and again, but he didn't pick up. Somewhere inside him still lived a man who loved her, who believed in her, who wanted to give her a chance to say something. But that man died the moment she clutched the sheet to her chest and whispered, "You were supposed to come back tomorrow." Alex exhaled, letting those words finally drift away. The phone continued to vibrate. He reached out, picked it up, and without thinking threw it out the window. The gadget flew off into the darkness, dissolving into the night along with Kelly's voice. There was only the road ahead, and a new life that didn't include her anymore. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.